The 24-25 Broadway season may be the greatest season in Broadway history, and because of that, this makes the predictions for the Tony Award difficult. I have literally no idea who's going to win some of these races, but let's try to predict the Tony Awards anyway, because why not? Here are some of my predictions for who is going to win on Tony night, as well as some of my own personal picks, because they are not always the same. The greatest part about this being the best Tony season ever is that for a lot of these, anyone could win, and I'd be like, yeah, love that choice. Right choice. I want a 5-way tie for some of these categories. Now, if this is your first time seeing me, my name is Kate Reinking. I am a theater critic and content creator on TikTok and now YouTube. And I love talking about theater because theater is life. And this season, I did see all 42 eligible shows. So I feel like I should know who's going to win, but this race is just so close, I truly have no clue. It is anybody's game. So let's dive right into it, starting with the design categories. For Best Sound Design of a Play, the nominees are Paul Arditi for Stranger Things The First Shadow, Palmer Hefferson for John Proctor's The Villain, Daniel Kluger for Good Night and Good Luck, Nick Powell for The Hills of California, and Clemence Williams for The Picture of Dorian Gray. There were actually a lot of good sound designs this year. I really love these nominees. I mean, of course, you have the music in The Hills of California. Picture of Dorian Gray has pre-recorded bits as well as Sarah Snook talking live, and it really has to blend those so you can't tell which Sarah Snook is talking. So that's kind of a point for Picture of Dorian Gray. But I truly feel like Stranger Things is a technical marvel that has the potential to sweep the design categories. So I have to go Paul Arditi on this one for Stranger Things The First Shadow. If I was a Tony voter, Paul would also be my pick. So I'm going double Stranger Things The First Shadow for sound design of a play. For sound design of a musical, the nominees are Jonathan Deans for Buena Vista Social Club, Adam Fisher for Sunset Boulevard, Peter Helsinki for Just in Time, Peter Helsinki again for Maybe a Happy Ending, and Dan Moses Schreier for Floyd Collins. Now, this is such a stacked category. I think the sound design in Floyd Collins is stunning, especially as Floyd is in the cave. The Maybe Happy Ending sound design is so much fun, especially mixing in, of course, the jazz records and the sound effects that our helper bots make. The Buena Vista Social Club sound design with that live band on stage is so incredibly well done. But frankly, if Sunset Boulevard doesn't win this, I will be so upset. This is one of the few categories that I feel like there is a clear winner. Not only is the sound design in that theater impeccable, no matter where you sit, and I have sat from the balcony to the last row of the orchestra, it just sounds so good. But the fact that they are able to mic Tom Francis walking on 44th and feed him the audio of what's happening inside and sync that up perfectly, this is Adam Fisher's to lose. Adam Fisher hands down for my prediction as well as my pick if I was voting. Moving on to Best Costume Design of a Play, the nominees are Brenda Abandondalo for Good Night and Good Luck, Mara Horwell for The Picture of Dorian Gray, Rob Howell for The Hills of California, Holly Pearson for Oh Mary, and Bridget Riefenstahl for Stranger Things The First Shadow. Again, I think Stranger Things is going to sweep the design categories, and the costumes in this production are mind-blowing at times. They're very simple, designed like 1950s, but the things that they do on that stage to transition between scenes and make it feel very cinematic, like you were watching the TV show, is so incredibly well done. There are a couple of quick changes in Stranger Things The First Shadow that I still think about. I truly think this is Bridget Riefenstahl's, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, but I do think it is her Tony to lose. She is my pick, both for my prediction and my vote. Moving on to Costume Design of a Musical, the nominees are Didi Aite for Buena Vista Social Club, Greg Barnes for Boop, Clint Ramos for Maybe Happy Ending, Paul Tazwell, Death Becomes Her, and Catherine Zuber, Just in Time. Another incredible selections of costumes. I love the costume design in Maybe Happy Ending and how it feels so quaint while still being futuristic, which I think is like hard to capture. Of course, Greg Barnes's costumes in Boop are so well done, from the Comic-Con sequence to the incredible Act 2 opener. And I do think that Greg Barnes has a chance to take this, but I truly think this is Paul Tazwell's to lose. The way that the costumes play a part in Death Becomes Her are so incredibly well done. You have, of course, the hilarious body double action. You have a lot of really fun costume effects in this. I truly think Paul Tazwell has costume design in the bag, and he is my pick for both my prediction and my vote. Moving on to lighting design of a play, the nominees are Natasha Chivers for The Hills of California, John Clark for Stranger Things The First Shadow, Heather Gilbert and David Bengali for Good Night and Good Luck. That is a lighting and projection design combination. You also have Natasha Katz and Hannah Wazaleski for John Proctor as the villain. Again, another lighting design and projection design combination. And Nick Schlepper for The Picture of Dorian Gray. This could go a couple different ways. I do think the lighting design in Hills of California is stunning. The lighting design in John Proctor as the villain is really, really well done. But again, I think Stranger Things is going to sweep those design categories, and the lighting in it is stunning. I do wonder, however, because for Stranger Things, lighting design and projection design are separate, if people are going to instead vote for the scenic design and not the lighting, because the lighting is a little more subtle than the projections that are used. But I do think ultimately Stranger Things is going to take this category. So again, I'm going John Clark for both my prediction and my pick. For best lighting design of a musical, the nominees are Jack Knowles for Sunset Boulevard, Tyler Michelot for Buena Vista Social Club, Scott Zelensky and Rui Hong-sun for Floyd Collins, Ben Stanton for Maybe Happy Ending, and Justin Townsend for Death Becomes Her. This is another really stacked category. I especially love the lighting design in Buena Vista Social Club. I think it is stunning, and I do think that there is a chance that Buena Vista Social Club could take this, but I have to go Jack Knowles for Sunset Boulevard. The Sunset Boulevard lighting is the scenic design in the show. It is so incredibly well done and makes the show feel so dynamic. But what a strong set of lighting designs this year. I also absolutely adore the lighting in Maybe Happy Ending, but I do think ultimately this goes to Sunset Boulevard, and Sunset Boulevard would be my personal pick as well. Moving on to best scenic design of a play, the nominees are Marcia Ginsburg for English, Rob Howell for The Hills of California, Marge Horwell and David Bergman for The Picture of Dorian Gray, Miriam Buther and 59 for Stranger Things The First Shadow. Both Stranger Things The First Shadow and Picture of Dorian Gray are scenic design and video elements combined. And finally, Scott Pask for Good Night and Good Luck. I really love all of these scenic designs. I think ultimately, again, this is going to go to Stranger Things for the incredible scenic elements, but if I was voting, I would be voting for Hills of California. I love the Hills of California scenic design, the way that the tiles matched up on the floor, the way that the scenic design rotated and brought us through time, the staircases kind of looming over the entire set for the entire show that ended up culminating in one of the most incredible moments in that play. I just think the Hills of California scenic design is gorgeous, and that would have my vote. But Stranger Things is a design juggernaut, and I do think it's going to sweep all 4 categories. Now moving on to best scenic design of a musical. The nominees are Rachel Hawk for Swept Away, Dane LaFrey and George Reeve for Maybe Happy Ending, that is both video elements and scenic design, Arnolfo Maldonado for Buena Vista Social Club, Derek McLean for Death Becomes Her, and Derek McLean for Just in Time. What a lineup of scenic design this year. Every single one of these sets is stunning. I will say one of my biggest issues with Maybe a Happy Ending is, of course, the sightlines in that theater. And as much as I love the scenic design, the fact that there are so many sightline issues, I just cannot give it to Maybe Happy Ending. But I do think there is a world that, because the Tony voters are sitting dead center most likely, that they will end up picking Maybe Happy Ending for scenic design. but I do think that the best scenic design overall is most likely going to go to Buena Vista Social Club. I think the Buena Vista Social Club set is stunning, and the way that it transitions between the past and the present is so incredibly well done. So ultimately, that is going to be my prediction. However, if I was voting, this would go to Rachel Hawk for Swept Away. That scenic design was jaw-dropping. One of the coolest scenic transitions I have seen in a theater, and I do think that the design lost a little bit of its wow factor when it transferred to the bigger space on Broadway than when it was in the more intimate spaces at its regional premieres, but it's still incredibly well done, and that personally would have my vote. But given when Swept Away closed and recency bias, I do think this is ultimately going to go to Arnolfo Maldonado for Buena Vista Social Club, and it's a gorgeous set. Just the moment that you walk into that theater, I was already invested in this world that we were entering. Moving on to Best Orchestrations, the nominees are Andrew Resnick and Michael Thurber for Just in Time, Will Aronson for Maybe Happy Ending, Bruce Coughlin for Floyd Collins, Marco Paglia for Buena Vista Social Club, and David Cullen and Andrew Lloyd Webber for Sunset Boulevard. I can see this category actually going a couple of different ways. I think the orchestrations this year are really, really strong. They all kind of add something new. I am a little surprised that we didn't see Jason Robert Brown sneak into this category for Last 5 Years, but I'm definitely not mad about it as much as I love the new orchestrations for that show. And I keep going back and forth on who I ultimately think is going to win this. Of course, you have the fact that Buena Vista Social Club already has a special Tony for the band, and I think that the orchestrations in that show are so incredibly well done. The orchestrations in Maybe Happy Ending are stunning, and especially the way that they highlight the orchestra in that show. We could see orchestrations end up going to Maybe Happy Ending because they didn't get a special nod for the orchestra themselves in a similar way that Buena Vista Social Club did. I could also see this going to Sunset Boulevard, especially with how the orchestrations help to make that production feel like a film. It feels like the score is more like a film underscoring than a musical theater score, which supports the vision of this revival so incredibly well. And I truly don't know which way to go on this category. I think ultimately I'm going to predict a Sunset win here, but it could be any one of those three. But I think I gotta go David Cullen and Andrew Lloyd Webber for Sunset. But if I was voting, I think I would give this to Buena Vista Social Club. I think that the orchestrations are stunning, and they're also such an important part of the storytelling of that story that Marco Paglia would absolutely have my vote here. Moving on to another incredibly tough category. I'm telling y'all, these Tonys are wild. Best Original Score. What a stacked category. And especially when we had fewer original scores than it feels like we normally do, but these 5 that made it into the nominations, all winners in my book. The nominees are Dead Outlaw, written by David Yazbek and Eric Della Penna, Death Becomes Her, written by Julia Madison and Noel Carey, Maybe Happy Ending, written by Will Aronson and Hugh Park, Operation Mincemeat, written by David Cumming, Felix Hagen, Natasha Hodgson, and Zoe Roberts, and Real Women Have Curves, written by Joy Huerta and Benjamin Velez. Every single one of these could win, and I'd be like, yeah, right choice was made. I see a world in which Maybe Happy Ending sweeps all of the writing categories. I could also see a world in which they literally all split across multiple musicals. I think the Real Women Have Curves score is so incredibly well done, and the fact that this is only one of 2 nominations for Real Women Have Curves and how beloved that musical is, I do see a world in maybe Real Women Have Curves picks up score because of that. I think the Operation Mincemeat score is a ton of fun. I could see this going to Mincemeat. The Maybe Happy Ending score is just so incredibly charming, and especially those instrumentals are so well done. I could see a world in which if Maybe Happy Ending doesn't get orchestrations, that maybe they end up giving it score. The Death Becomes Her score is one of my favorites of the season that really snuck up on me, and just how incredibly well crafted and clever it is. and maybe my favorite lyrics of the season. The lyrics are just so funny. I mean, just everything I do is for the gays is like 10 out of 10 lyric. It feels so classic Broadway, but while also feeling so incredibly now. And then of course, Dead Outlaw. And I think the Dead Outlaw score is unlike a lot of scores that we've heard. I find it hard to even compare it to anything else. The closest that I get is like an Americana country western Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I think ultimately Dead Outlaw is going to win score, but I think if I was voting, I would end up voting for Death Becomes Her. I think it's just so incredibly well done, and in such a stacked season, and especially with the Tony voters having access to all of the cast recordings, Death Becomes Her is the cast recording that I kind of keep going back to. But again, this could go to any 5 of these shows. They're all really good scores. We were thriving this season. Next up, we have one of my favorite categories, Best Book of a Musical. Usually the book needs work, but not in any of these 5 shows, which is incredible. The nominees for Best Book of a Musical are Buena Vista Social Club, written by Marco Ramirez, Dead Outlaw, written by Itamar Moses, Death Becomes Her, written by Marco Panett, Maybe Happy Ending, written by Will Aronson and Hugh Park, and Operation Mincemeat, written by David Cumming, Felix Hagen, Natasha Hodgson, and Zoe Roberts. What a strong collection of books this year. Like, truly, this is another category where any 5 of these could win and I would be happy. I love the book of Buena Vista Social Club. I think there's so many great quotes in it that I'm still thinking about today. And again, the way that they are able to balance the 2 timelines. I also think it's such a unique approach to the bio jukebox musical that really helps to reimagine the subgenre. The Dead Outlaw book is so incredibly cynical and funny and such a fascinating look at capitalism and what we choose to find entertaining. Of course, you have Death Becomes Her, which in my opinion is the rare movie-call that improves upon its source material. I think this is even better than the film, and a lot of that is due to the strength of this book as well, of course, as the score. Maybe Happy Ending's book is just so incredibly charming, and this musical is so beloved. Again, I could see a world in which maybe Happy Ending does end up sweeping all of the writing categories. And finally, Operation Mincemeat. And I personally think that the book of Operation Mincemeat is stronger than the score. It's such a fun story, the way that it is structured, the way that it is able to balance the humorous scenes with the more heartwarming elements. I think it does that incredibly well. And I could see a world in which the voters do want to vote Operation Mincemeat in for something. I think ultimately Operation Mincemeat would be my personal pick for Best Book of a Musical because I would personally split up all of the writing awards. But I do wonder if how quickly the resolution happens in Operation Mincemeat may count a little bit against it. So I think ultimately for my prediction, I'm gonna go Death Becomes Her on this one. Moving on to Best Choreography, the nominees are Joshua Bergasse for Smash, Camille A. Brown for Gypsy, Christopher Gattelli for Death Becomes Her, Jerry Mitchell for Boop, and Patricia Delgado and Justin Peck for Buena Vista Social Club. Another really stacked category. I love the choreography in Buena Vista Social Club and the way that it is able to bring this story to life, and the community that we are seeing on stage really enhances the music that is being played. I definitely see what Camille Brown was doing in Gypsy, and while not all of the choreography worked for me, I do think that she's so incredibly beloved that this could end up being her year, and especially with how that choreography elevated the material and brought something new out of it as opposed to doing the same Gypsy choreography that we're used to seeing. But I think ultimately this is gonna go to Jerry Mitchell. The choreography in Boop is just so incredibly well done, especially the opening tap sequence, the top of Act 2 sequence, and how well that is choreographed with the costume design. Boop is kind of a mess of a show, but it's charming because of not just Jasmine Amy Rogers and some of the design elements, but because of the choreography. It makes it feel like such classic Broadway, and I think this category goes to Jerry Mitchell. And honestly, if I was voting, I'd be voting for Jerry Mitchell. I love the dance and boop. Moving on to our directors. Best Director of a Play, the nominees are Knut Adams for English, Sam Mendes in The Hills of California, Sam Pinkelton for Oh Mary, Danya Taymor for John Proctor's The Villain, and Kip Williams for The Picture of Dorian Gray. Another truly toss-up category. There are so many different ways that this could go. I think Oh Mary is an incredibly beloved play, and Sam Pinkelton's direction is so strong, and I do think the fact that we have gotten replacement cast only strengthens how well Sam Pinkelton has directed that production. I think Sam Mendes' direction in Hills of California is so powerful. Danya Taymor's direction in John Proctor's The Villain, especially those transitional sequences in the classroom, is really well done. Kip Williams also adapted The Picture of Dorian Gray, and so I do wonder if they end up giving it to him just because of all of the technical elements and how much that is woven together and how precisely The Picture of Dorian Gray is choreographed. However, I do feel like because of how precise it is choreographed, it kind of takes away from the heart of that show. So I keep going back and forth on whether they give direction to Kip Williams or not. I think ultimately direction is going to go to Sam Pinkelton here, especially with the love for Oh Mary by the theater community. But if I was voting, it'd go to Knut Adams. I love the direction in English. From the transitions, the passing of time, the way that he allows scenes to breathe, the proximity that the characters have to each other within the scenes, the way that the entire thing is choreographed on this rotating set. I love the direction of English, and I really think that it elevates what I think is such a strong play. And in my heart, Knut Adams would be my pick for director this year. Moving on to Best Direction of a Musical, the nominees are Sahim Ali for Buena Vista Social Club, Michael Arden for Maybe Happy Ending, David Cromer for Dead Outlaw, Christopher Gattelli for Death Becomes Her, Jamie Lloyd for Sunset Boulevard. Now, I truly think, because of how beloved Maybe Happy Ending is, I do think Michael Arden is going to pick up this award. And I think that if you're sitting in center orchestra, the direction is incredibly well done. From the characterizations to all of the world building that he has crafted, to the subtle differences between our Helper Bot 3 and our Helper Bot 5. There is so much attention to detail in this production. I do think Michael Arden is going to take direction here. However, the one big attention to detail that I just can't get past is how bad the sightlines are in that theater. And there are so many moments that if you are sitting on one side or the other, you are going to completely miss. And that to me just really detracts from the overall direction of a show. So ultimately, if I was voting, I would be voting for Jamie Lloyd. And I think that the direction in Sunset Boulevard is masterful. Not just the entire reimagining of a piece that is so grand and lavish to this incredibly cynical and bleak and film noir version that feels more in line with the original source material. Not only all of the layers in that production, like the fact that there are ensemble members that go through their own storylines in that show. Of course, you have these incredible sequences, not just the walk, the legendary walk, but that car chase sequence and how well it is crafted, the final confrontation as Betty goes to the house and the lights turn red and everyone's like, those chilling final moments, one of the best blackouts on stage this season. I just think that what Jamie Lloyd has done with Sunset Boulevard needs to be studied. And he absolutely should be winning Best Director here and would be my pick. But I do think ultimately Michael Arden's probably going to win this. And now for some of the toughest categories, the acting categories, starting off with maybe the easiest, that is Best Featured Actor in a Musical. The nominees being Brooks Ashmanskas for Smash, Jeb Brown for Dead Outlaw, Danny Burstein for Gypsy, Jack Malone in Operation Mincemeat, and Taylor Trench in Floyd Collins. What a set of nominations. Now, of course, there are definitely some snubs here. I'm surprised we didn't see Christopher Sieber in this category. I'm surprised we didn't see Tom Sesma in this category for Dead Outlaw. But I love this set of actors. I think they're all incredibly strong in their shows. But nobody, in my opinion, comes close to Jack Malone. Not just his Hester and, of course, the incredible Dear Bill in Operation Mincemeat, but also the way that he is able to transform from Hester to Spilsbury within the show. He is able to truly showcase his range as a performer, making you laugh and then breaking your heart the next moment. I think this is Jack Malone's to lose, and Jack Malone, hands down, would have my vote. Moving on to Best Featured Actress in a Musical, the nominees are Natalie Venetia Belcon for Buena Vista Social Club, Julia Nightel for Dead Outlaw, Gracie Lawrence for Just in Time, Justina Machado for Real Women Have Curves, and Joy Woods for Gypsy. First of all, so happy that Joy Woods finally got her nomination that she should have gotten last season. Absolutely love that she's in this category. There were definitely so many great performances this year, but I'm really happy with these 5. I think this is a great set of performers. For me, if I was voting, this is an easy vote for Natalie Venetia Belcon. I think, first of all, she almost acts like a leading actress in that show, but the way that she commands the stage from the moment she enters the musical, and the way that she interacts with the band, with the cast, even when she's not saying a word. I do keep going back and forth on my actual prediction though, because Julia Nightel has been getting a lot of love recently, and I do wonder if perhaps she could end up winning this category for her performance in Dead Outlaw. Like Jack Malone, she does play multiple characters in Dead Outlaw. I think she does all of them incredibly well. She does have one incredible song where she ages throughout the number, and you really get to see her work as a performer on full display, and I could see that swaying in her favor for the win. But ultimately, for my prediction, I think I still have to go Natalie Venetia Belcon for this. She is just giving such a incredible level of performance on that stage. It's one of my favorite performances that I saw all year, period. I really think she's going to take this one home. Moving on to Best Featured Actor in a Play, the nominees are Glenn Davis in Purpose, Gabriel Ebert in John Proctor's The Villain, Francis Jew in Yellowface, Bob Odenkirk in Glengarry Glen Ross, and Conrad Ricamora in Oh Mary. This is another coin flip for me. This really could go any way. I do think that as much as I don't like the play and I hate David Mamet, the performance that Bob Odenkirk is giving in Glengarry Glen Ross is kind of incredible. Truly commands that stage. It was great to see him in a Broadway show. I always love Conrad Ricamora, and his Lincoln is just so much fun to watch. Francis Jew is an incredible performer and really beloved. I could see him taking this. Gabriel Ebert perfectly captures all of the nuances that he needs to in John Proctor's The Villain. And Glenn Davis is just one cast member in what is the most stacked cast on Broadway currently in Purpose. I loved his performance in this. I do think ultimately this is going to go to Bob Odenkirk, but I do think that if I was voting, I would end up voting for Conrad Ricamora, and not only because his performance as Lincoln is incredible, but also because he was snubbed for Here Lies Love, and I will never forget that. Moving on to Best Featured Actress in a Play, the most stacked category at the Tonys. Oh my gosh, the fact that there could have been 20 actresses in this category, but we narrowed it down to 5, and those 5 nominees are Tala Asha for English, Jessica Hecht in Eureka Day, Marjan Nishat in English, Finestraza in John Proctor's The Villain, and Carrie Young in Purpose. First of all, congratulations to all 5 of these women, because literally just getting into the category is a win. The number of featured actresses in a play giving some of the greatest performances this season is like innumerable. I do think ultimately this is going to go to Jessica Hecht in Eureka Day. What an incredible performance that she gave of a character that could be so easy to hate. But if I was voting, again, another character that would have been so easy to hate, and yet she made it so lovable, Finestraza in John Proctor's The Villain. Her Beth is so sweet and so well crafted. You just want to give her the biggest hug. And that is a character that could be so incredibly annoying, and she steers so clear of that. I love her in John Proctor's The Villain. She is truly the standout performance for me in that entire play of incredibly gifted performers. I would love to see Finna win here. She would have my vote easy, but I do think ultimately this is going to go to Jessica Hecht. Now for two of the most contentious categories at the Tonys, starting off with Best Leading Actor in a Musical, our nominees are Darren Criss in Maybe Happy Ending, Andrew Durand in Dead Outlaw, Tom Francis in Sunset Boulevard, Jonathan Groff in Just in Time, Jeremy Jordan in Floyd Collins, and James Monroe Iglehart in A Wonderful World, the Louis Armstrong musical. Congratulations to James Monroe Iglehart, who's just lucky to be in this category. I do think Jeremy Jordan is giving the best performance of his career. I don't ultimately think he's going to win this. And Andrew Durand plays a corpse so incredibly well, but I don't think he's going to win this category. I think ultimately it is going to come down to Darren Criss, Jonathan Groff, or Tom Francis. Now, of course, Jonathan Groff won last year. I don't think he wins again, but I wouldn't be mad if he wins again. I think his Bobby Darin is so incredibly charismatic and charming, and the way that he commands that stage in Circle in the Square really brings Just in Time to life. Darren Criss's physicality in Maybe Happy Ending is so well done, and he's giving again another performance that could have come across as annoying but rather comes across as incredibly endearing. The way that he brings Oliver to life, you have to give him props for that. But ultimately, I think the standout of the season is, in fact, Tom Francis. Tom Francis won the Olivier for this award. I think he's going to also win the Tony. He's one of the breakout stars of the season, and he walks across 44th every night. Well, almost every night. Tom Francis is both my prediction for the win and would also have my vote. Now for a much harder category, Best Leading Actress in a Musical. The nominees being Jasmine Amy Rogers in Boop, Megan Hilty in Death Becomes Her, Audra McDonald in Gypsy, Nicole Scherzinger in Sunset Boulevard, and Jen Samard in Death Becomes Her. Look, take your pick. Take your pick. This could go to any 5 of these actresses. Shout out to Helen J. Shen, who frankly should also be in this category. But these 5 performers, I don't even know. I truly don't even know. At the beginning of the season, I thought Nicole Scherzinger had this in the bag, that they could just start engraving the statue. After I saw Gypsy for the first time, I still thought Nicole Scherzinger was going to win. But after revisiting both Sunset and Gypsy recently, I don't know. I keep going back and forth. I think the way that Audra McDonald has grown into Rose and all of the nuances that she brings to that performance, I mean, she is the greatest of all time for a reason. She has the record by far of most Tony wins for a reason, and I could see her picking up her 7th Tony this year. But the way that Nicole Scherzinger commands that stage, from the moment that she steps into the light with those sunglasses to the final bloody moments of that show, is just so captivating, and I could see a world in which Nicole takes this. Of course, I can't count out the other 3 women. I think the comedic performances that Jasmine Amy Rogers, Jen Samard, and Megan Hilty are all giving in their respective shows is incredible. I mean, just how different of comedic performances Jen Samard and Megan Hilty are giving in the same show. I don't know how you would vote for one over the other. This is one of those years that I wish we had a Best Duo category at the Tony Awards. There was even a while this season where I thought maybe because of how charming Jasmine Amy Rogers is in Boop and how much she elevates what I don't think is the greatest material, that she could potentially take home this award and kind of be the Malaya Joy Moon upset of the season. But I do still think this is going to come down to Audra and Nicole. And I have no idea who takes it. So we're gonna bring out the coin. Heads or the carnation, of course, has to go to Audra as Rose. The Hadestown tail side will go to Nicole in Sunset. And let's let the fate decide who is going to win the Tony Award. That is Audra McDonald, y'all. Audra McDonald, 7th Tony, determined by a coin flip. But personally, if I was voting, I think I would vote for Nicole. Moving on to Best Leading Actor in a Play, the nominees are George Clooney in Good Night and Good Luck, Cole Escola in Oh Mary, John Michael Hill in Purpose, Daniel Day Kim in Yellowface, Harry Lennox in Purpose, and Louis McCartney in Stranger Things: The First Shadow. Again, another stacked category, though I have to shout out Kit Connor, who is absolutely snubbed, and there are a couple performances that I would have swapped out for him. But I do think ultimately this category is a two-person race, coming down to Cole Escola in Oh Mary and Louis McCartney in Stranger Things: The First Shadow. Now, I do think personally Cole Escola is going to come away with a Tony on Tony Awards night, but I do think it's going to come down to, for Best Play and Leading Actor in a Play, are Tony voters going to only end up voting them for one and picking a second choice for the other? Are they going to give Cole Escola Best Play, and in doing that end up voting Louis McCartney for Stranger Things: First Shadow? Or are they going to vote Cole Escola for Leading Actor in a Play and give Best Play to one of the other incredible nominees? I don't know. I think ultimately Cole Escola is going to get Leading Actor in a Play, but I do see a world in which Louis McCartney takes this. And even in my own choice, I don't know who I would pick, but I do think ultimately I would vote for Cole Escola. But gosh, Louis McCartney's performance is like incredible. Everything that he is doing on that stage, jaw-dropping. And also, this is just a reminder that the fact that Cole Escola, a non-binary performer, had to choose a gendered category to be considered as a performer at the Tony Awards is stupid and outdated, and we should just have genderless awards categories already. But moving on. Our final acting category is Best Leading Actress in a Play, and the nominees are Laura Donnelly in The Hills of California, Mia Farrow in The Roommate, LaTanya Richardson Jackson in Purpose, Sadie Sink in John Proctor's The Villain, and Sarah Snook in The Picture of Dorian Gray. And I do think ultimately this is going to be an easy win for Sarah Snook in The Picture of Dorian Gray. I do think what she is doing on that stage is incredibly impressive and is going to give her the win. However, I think the best performance this year, and the person with my vote, would be Laura Donnelly in Hills of California. Laura Donnelly balances two very different characters, is giving a masterful performance, and not only that, but was just so incredibly moving on that stage, which is what I was missing from The Picture of Dorian Gray just as an entire show, but including from Sarah Snook's performance. At times it felt to me like Sarah Snook was just trying to get through The Picture of Dorian Gray as fast as possible, as opposed to letting those moments breathe, which I do think also comes down to the direction of the play. But for me, it makes her performance just not as strong as a performance like Laura Donnelly's in The Hills of California. But I don't think Tony voters are going to vote that way. I do think Sarah Snook takes this one home. And the four final categories for Best Overall Productions this year, starting with the revivals. The Best Play Revival nominees are Eureka Day, Our Town, Romeo and Juliet, and Yellowface. Can I just say how happy I am that Othello and Glengarry Glen Ross are not in this category. Praise be. I do think it is interesting that Eureka Day and Cult of Love, that were both originally produced in the same year of 2018, that Eureka Day got the classic designation but not Cult of Love. But alas, I did truly love this Romeo and Juliet production. I don't think it wins, and it was very mixed, but I'm glad that it got a nomination in this category. But I definitely think that Best Play Revival this year is going to be between either Eureka Day or Yellowface. Eureka Day was the most recent production, but I do think that Yellowface is going to benefit from the fact that they just released a live capture on PBS Great Performances that you can watch for free. I do ultimately think that this is going to go to Eureka Day, which I just feel was the stronger stronger overall production, especially the attention to detail, the timeliness of the material, the performances, and ultimately Eureka Day would be my pick as well. Moving on to Best Musical Revival, the nominees are Floyd Collins' Gypsy, Pirates the Penzance Musical, and Sunset Boulevard. Now I would say that this would be a two-show race between Gypsy and Sunset Boulevard, but the fact that George C. Wolfe didn't even get a direction nomination, and ultimately I think Sunset's the stronger production, I think Sunset is going to take this category easily, and of course, no surprise here, my vote would also go to Sunset. Moving on to Best New Play, maybe my favorite category of the year other than Best Book of a Musical. The nominees are English, The Hills of California, John Proctor's The Villain, Oh Mary, and Purpose. If we could have a five-way tie, that would be perfection. In this category, we have two Pulitzer winners in both English and Purpose. Oh Mary was a Pulitzer Prize finalist. I truly want all five of these plays to win. I love them so much. Why is this category so stacked? I do think ultimately this is going to go to Oh Mary. Now, usually the Tony Awards don't end up awarding the comedies, but I do think with how well crafted and how beloved Oh Mary is right now, that this is kind of in the prime position to take the win. And I think the fact that it is the only comedy amongst a lot of plays that have similar themes and similar vibes, that it could end up taking the lead because of that. I think ultimately Best Play is going to go to Oh Mary, but if I was voting, five-way tie, but I think I would probably end up voting for John Proctor's The Villain. That play is just so incredibly special, and the catharsis is just so powerful. John Proctor's The Villain would definitely be my pick, but I do think Oh Mary takes this. But y'all, any five of these plays wins and I'll be happy. And finally, Best New Musicals. The nominees are Buena Vista Social Club, Dead Outlaw, Death Becomes Her, Maybe Happy Ending, and Operation Mincemeat. Honestly, another category where this could go to any five of these musicals and I would be happy. This is truly the most stacked year for Best New Musicals, so much so that Real Women Have Curves should be in this category as a sixth nominee, but I wouldn't replace any of these nominees to get Real Women Have Curves in there. I just think it should just be there because it's on equal level as all of these musicals. Ultimately, I think because it is so beloved and the fact that it has unanimous likability, Best New Musical is going to Maybe Happy Ending this year. I wouldn't be mad with any of these musicals taking home the prize, but ultimately if I was voting, I would also be voting for Maybe Happy Ending. I just think it's a perfect show, and we have not had a musical have unanimous positive reviews since Kimberly Akimbo, which also won Best Musical its year. It is just such a sweet show that I honestly have yet to hear anybody say anything negative about. The worst that I've heard is like, oh, it was a little slower than I thought. But what an incredible show, and I do think it is going to take home the top prize of the night. And that is all my predictions for 2025. Do I feel confident about them? Absolutely not. This could go so many ways, and honestly, for so many of these categories, anybody that wins is going to be the correct choice in my book, with the exception of sound design of a musical. Adam Fisher better be getting that one. But other than that, what an incredible year for nominees and shows as a whole. The true winners of the 24-25 Broadway season are us, the audience members, because we have been feasting this season. I cannot wait for the Tony Awards on June 8th. If you disagree with any of my picks, let me know in the comments who would you like to see win. And if you haven't already, please, 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 like this video and subscribe to follow more theater content. I am currently in the middle of a great theater adventure where I am seeing as much theater as possible over a 30+ day period, and will be vlogging the entire thing, so definitely follow along as I get started on the 25-26 Broadway season, as well as some world premiere and regional premiere musicals and plays that could be part of upcoming Broadway seasons in our future. So if you don't already subscribe, definitely do that to follow along on the Great Theater Adventure 2.0. Thank you so much for watching.